I always enjoy having a house to myself. It gives me a sense of freedom and independence that I rarely experience when my parents are around. At that time, I was 18 years old, and my parents were on a short business trip. I was alone at home that night, sitting on the sofa browsing my phone when I heard a creaking sound. I stopped to listen carefully, but there was nothing else. I tried to ignore it as just settling house noises, but being alone made it hard to shake off the creepy feeling. I decided to distract myself by watching TV. I clicked on a random show and settled back on the sofa, but as I watched, I kept feeling like someone was standing behind me. I would quickly turn around each time, but there was nobody there, just an empty room with a flickering TV casting shadows on the walls. After about an hour of feeling uneasy, I decided I just needed to look around to reassure myself that I was safe. I turned off the TV and walked upstairs. There was nothing there, just an empty hallway leading to the bedrooms. I went into each room to look around. Nothing was amiss, and there was nobody in any of the rooms. I stepped back into the hallway and rubbed my eyes, thinking I was acting like a scared little kid for being too afraid of anything. I walked back downstairs and started descending the stairs when I reached the bottom. I turned into the living room, but from the corner of my eye, I saw something in the hallway. I stepped back and squinted to look at the front. The door was wide open. My heart stopped and I couldn't breathe as I stared at the door. Honestly, I'm not sure if I remembered to lock the door, but anyway, I never heard it open. I didn't know if there was someone inside the house, or if they had already left, or where they were in general. I stayed still and walked along the hallway towards the door. I stepped onto the porch and quickly glanced around before closing the door and locking it almost frantically. From afar, I heard the sound of the floor creaking from the other side of the house. It wasn't like someone walking, but maybe hiding. I walked to the kitchen. I stood at the far end of the room without seeing anything. But as I stood there, I heard a very faint breathing sound coming from behind the kitchen island. Someone was crouching, hiding just a few meters in front of me. Music. I ran out the front door, dialing 911 as I continued down the sidewalk. When the police arrived, they found no one inside, even though someone had clearly entered and walked around both downstairs and upstairs. They found shoe prints on the carpet upstairs that matched those found in the kitchen. What scared me the most was knowing that they had entered while I was at home, perhaps seeing me on the sofa while watching TV. I didn't know what their intentions were. Maybe they were just crazy people with no intentions at all. But even to this day, I find myself constantly looking over my shoulder when I'm alone, laughing. I work unusual shifts at my job, usually starting at 4 in the morning and ending at 4 in the afternoon. When I get off, I go home and immediately sleep for 8 hours, then wake up around 9 in the evening and stay awake until work. I prefer waking up in the following hours. I thought it was just another workday, and I arrived home and slept as usual at 10. I woke up, made some food, did some housework, and at 1 in the morning, I decided to take a walk before work. I do this almost every day before work just to keep my body awake. I put on a thin jacket and went outside. My neighborhood is always quiet and peaceful at these times. That's why I enjoy being awake at these moments. Sometimes it feels like I have the whole world to myself. As I turned onto the small road that passes through the preserved area of my neighborhood, the road was lit by dim lights along the sides as I walked. I saw a figure sitting on the bench underneath. He was quite far away when I first noticed him, maybe 2 or 3 minutes before I got close. But as I got closer, he was still there. I thought he was a jogger, taking a brief rest or something. If not, I didn't know why he was there. As I passed by, he stared at me. I smiled to show I was friendly, but he just stared and didn't say anything, which didn't make me feel any better. So I picked up my pace and planned to turn onto the next path about a quarter-mile down. Just a few seconds later, another man came from a corner ahead of me and started walking towards me. I turned my head and saw the man on the bench now also walking towards me. I took a few more steps while my mind raced thinking about what to do. I wasn't sure if this was some kind of trap, but ultimately, I didn't want to take any chances. I veered into the trees and walked fast enough until I forgot about them once I turned off the path. Even though I heard the footsteps of the two men, I ran until I walked quite far into the woods, then settled my breath next to a tree while looking around. I could see both men standing at the edge of the road looking towards me. I took it as a sign that they were working together, so I kept walking through the forest until I found myself on the other side of the neighborhood. I made it home safely, and even went to work right after. I didn't immediately call the police because I wasn't sure if it was really a trap or not. But the more I thought about the men standing together looking into the woods, I decided it was best to call the police just in case. A month later, a woman from my neighborhood was kidnapped while out for a morning walk. I don't know if it was those men or if there was any connection at all, but I had a bad feeling in my heart that I would soon disappear. This happened when I was 16 years old. I worked at a coffee shop 3 nights a week after school. The place is very small and only has 3 or 4 tables, but it's open until 11 on weekdays. I had been there for about 3 months and was starting to get to know the frequent customers. It was a small shop, so it was actually rarer to see new customers. Anyway, one of the frequent customers was a man who introduced himself to me as the future Owen every day. Around 10 o'clock, ordered a small coffee and sat at the table for 15 to 20 minutes on his laptop, then leaves. We sometimes make small talk, and he tells me he's working all night and needs coffee to stay awake. I never let conversations go on for too long because I didn't feel comfortable sharing personal details about myself with older men when I was only 16 years old. One night, though, Owen ordered the usual, but when he got his coffee, he told me I looked really cute today. I smiled and said thank you. But inside, I felt so disgusted I was also the only one closer, so was alone in the shop with him. It was a bit uncomfortable. He left soon after. But the next day I asked one of my coworkers about Owen. He was closed on the other days of the week when I wasn't working, so I assumed he would know exactly who he was, and probably know if he was creepy or no. But he said he didn't know who he was, even after describing it. He didn't know Owen had told me that he came every weekday before his night shift, but now I know that he only comes on the days I work. He left at 9 that night, and I was really worried. I spent the next hour trying to calm down, and told myself that it was all in my head. I was in the back storage room organizing shelves when I heard a bell near the door. I took a deep breath and prepared myself to act naturally, but just as I stepped towards the door leading to the service in the area, the door opened. I was shocked and stopped in my tracks. Owen was standing there, holding the door open just to make sure you were okay, he said, smiling at me. Then he stepped back and let the door close. The door was behind the desk, so he had to go to the area special employee just to check on me. 10 seconds after entering the store, something was wrong, especially with the others. I was thinking. I walked out to the cashier where she was standing. She then ordered and went to her table while I made her coffee. I could felt him watching me from the other side of the room. The feeling was very strong, and when I turned his head, his eyes were already on me. I handed him the cup, and he thanked me profusely. Then he sat down and took out his laptop. It was 10:15, so I started my usual cleaning routine. But at 10:45, I realized that Owen was still at the table he always leaves at 10:30, but he seemed to just be waiting there. I waited until 11.055 minutes after we technically closed before I packed up my things and walked over there. I told him the shop was closed and I needed to lock the door. He smiled and said yes, then stood up, but he didn't leave. He waited for me to step out and open the door for him. Owen was standing right next to me, basically breathing. My back as I locked the door, "Good night." I said turn around and walk quickly to my car. I pulled out of the parking lot and felt an overwhelming feeling of relief, but a few minutes later headlights appeared behind me. They followed me through a few turns, and finally into my neighborhood, fearing the worst. I continued driving in random directions and called the police. I told them my suspicions and described the vehicle. The officer told me to continue driving through the neighborhood, and an officer would be there shortly thereafter, even though the car stopped and turned down. Different streets in the neighborhood, I was still taking random turns for 10 minutes before I realized I was fine and walking to my house when I turned onto the street. Even though I was horrified, there was a police car in front of my house. And likewise, the car that was following me turned out to be Owen, who I was sure of. But I didn't think he already knew where I lived. I was really lucky that night because if I hadn't called the police, I would have most likely been kidnapped, or maybe worse. It scared me to think that he might have followed me home weeks earlier and maybe even tried to peek through my window or something, I don't know. But I was happy. It is all over.